Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ordinary People. I'm joined again by Neil and Paul. Hi, guys.
Hiya.
Hi, Andrew.
And we have a special guest tonight, as always. This is another Rich Hill man, and I'm going to let Neil tell you a bit more about him before we bring him on.
Good stuff. Thanks, Andrew. Honestly, it's such a privilege for me to be able to chat with Peter Cardwell tonight. And Peter is a familiar face. He's maybe moved away a wee bit from Rich Hill over the last number of years, but we still. I'm very territorial, so I like to still call them our own, and so it gives me great joy to be able to introduce Peter tonight. And so we're going to have a bit of a conversation. But Peter, thanks again for doing this. And just in case there's somebody that doesn't know you around Rich Hill or doesn't recognise your face, why don't you introduce yourself to us, please?
Well, thanks very much, Neil, and thanks Paul and Andrew as well. It's great to be able to do this podcast, and thank you very much for inviting me on. I grew up in Rich Hill. I was first 3.5 years of my life were in Castle Avenue, and then we moved to Richmond Heights, and my parents still live there. And in fact, I'm just back. I live in London now, but Rich Hill is always home, and I've actually just been with my parents for the past 7 weeks or so since Christmas. Just got back to London a few days ago, but really I sort of grew up in the area, went to Clough and Portadown College, and then I went off to university in England, and then became a journalist. But did quite a lot of journalism, including for the Portadown Times and Newsletter and the Irish News and Belfast Telegraph and various other papers when I was growing up, and as a professional journalist. And then I worked as a broadcast journalist for 10 years on lots of different programmes, including Newsnight and Sky News. And I was on E05 Live for 2 years as a reporter as well. And then I went into politics. I worked for the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, James Brokenshire, for about 1.5 years. And then I worked for various other politicians for another sort of 2 years or so before being unceremoniously sacked, as so many people are from government, about a year ago. And since then I've been doing various kind of bits of consultancy and media stuff, and actually wrote a book as well, which I know we're going to talk about at some stage. So that's the potted history, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. I didn't realise that you grew up for your first 3.5 years in Castle Avenue.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
All this time, I was round the corner. I grew up my first 12 years in Castle Drive. No, yep. Castle Gardens. Sorry, Castle Gardens.
Well, your mum minded me for a very short period.
Oh, really?
My abiding memory of that, it was only, I think my usual childminder was off or something. It was only for about 6 weeks or something. And my abiding memory was I had like a little key ring that had little bits that came out of it. Every day when we came home from school, you would take the wee bits out of the key ring and throw them at me. And just for badness, basically. And then I lost a bit of them and I was really annoyed. So yeah, I'll be bitter to the grave, Neil.
I hope that's not why you left Castle Avenue.
That's exactly the reason. No.
We're
a bit older, but no, sorry.
So guilty now.
Neil, but I'm sure that bit of the keyring probably cost probably about 5 or 10p. So add 25 years on this, and we'll call it a dinner.
Can't believe that story didn't make it into the book. It was well, we could just go straight into talking about the book, because I have it sitting here on my bookshelf, and honestly, like I can't speak any higher of this book. If I tried, it was such a fascinating read, and I love those moments. I love being from Rich Hill. Every time you mentioned Rich Hill, there was just something in me was just automatically, yes, that's still proud to be from Rich Hill. So I suppose we some things in common. We grew up in Rich Hill. Didn't realise we were as close. Didn't realise how horrible I was to you.
You weren't horrible. Please forgive me. Having a joke.
Went to Hardy. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, Hardy.
Yeah, and then Clough, as you say, and then Portadown College, and then obviously our lives went vastly different directions. But could you mention just a wee bit about Portadown College before we keep going? That there's those years that you spent.
Yeah, I was okay academically. It wasn't sort of terrible academically, but it was really at A level at Portadown College that I sort of, it's funny, lots of politicians say over the years, we've got to broaden the curriculum, we've got to make sure people do maths and science and all that kind of stuff, and maybe a language at A level. And I was completely against all that. I wanted to narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow, and I managed to get 4 subjects at A level that were all essay based, and it was just all about writing essays. So I did English, history, politics, and drama, and I just loved all of them and had really, really good teachers. And they actually introduced politics when I was the first year to do it at Portland College, and the head of politics, Sean Dunlop, is actually in the book, and it was really nice actually because I sort of stayed in touch a little bit with him through the years. I've been in a couple of times, talked to the class and things. But what was really good was I managed to bring, he had a group of students over in London when I was, did the job of special advisor to the Justice Secretary. So I was working with the Justice Secretary, a guy called Robert Buckland. And what was really nice is we had the class into Robert's office. He was away, and we'd all sat around and had a cup of tea and a Diet Coke. And I managed to break protocol and get Sean, who's a bit of a character, as anybody who knows him will tell you. And he actually got the wig, the Lord Chancellor's wig, and put it on, so on. And they're obviously snapping away and so on. So Robert wouldn't have known about that until it was in the book. So a terrible breach of protocol, but nonetheless it was funny. And of course he just lent into it, and it was good fun.
Brilliant. It was another one of those moments in the book that I, again, reading Sean Dunlop's name. There's still part of me still wants to call him Mr. Dunlop.
Yeah, I know. Definitely.
Sean Dunlop, but Sean, he was our rugby coach. I think pretty much the whole time I was at Portland College, and I was so fond of him. He was a really good teacher. Really good.
You didn't even realize you were learning with him. I mean, you just kind of, it was just like a conversation. And what he was really good at, we had people of really, sorry, I don't mean to be arrogant here, but there were people with like really quite mixed ability in our A-level classes. Some people who really struggled to kind of grasp things, and he was just so good with all of us. Like whether you got it immediately or whether you didn't get it, like he was so patient and good. And actually, I've been really privileged to have a number of really, really good teachers. Another one is Audrey Henderson, Mrs. Henderson, who's obviously originally from Rich Hill, who's kept in touch with me through the years and stuff as well. And actually for the Hardy Annual, which was lovely. But she gives me a Christmas card every year. She read the book, it's funny how you kind of get into adulthood and you sort of reconnect with people and around the village as well. Yeah. Mrs. Campbell, Mandy Campbell as well. Every now and again, always stops, always has a chat. There's just so many good things about the schools we went to.
Yeah. Just when you mentioned some of the primary school teachers, Audrey's not there anymore, but I was there as you were a good number of years ago, and yes. Now my kids have grown up, and I whenever we went back to school, my P2 teacher was Mrs. Lonsdale. I don't think that was her name at the time. I don't think she'd been married, but now all 3 of my kids that went through school have all had Mrs. Lonsdale
she's another
primary school teacher.
I did elocution with her actually, and in fact, I was at a reception in the House of Commons on the sort of the terrace where you're looking out on the Thames River and you see the London Eye and everything. It's really, really lovely.
Wow.
And a guy came up to me and said he's a guy involved with the military is her brother actually, and he said he just happened to be at that reception. Said, do you remember her? And of course I did. She's just a lovely sister, and we got a wee selfie and sent it to her and everything, which is just really nice. But,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, funny how things work out.
Very good. I love that. I actually have this sitting beside me. My wife wanted to know why I was rushing out of out to get to the shop at 7:30. I wanted to make sure
good.
I had read the book, and I wanted to prove it by getting the famous Diet Coke can. I haven't drank Diet Coke in years, but anyway.
Well, I see you. You have one
well,
there.
I see mine's slightly taller. I see yours.
Oh right. You're trying to outdo me. Yeah. No, it was my fuel, and actually I wrote the book at home during lockdown, and my dad and my mum were really, really trying to get me to drink less Diet Coke, but it's my one vice. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do illegal drugs, and I'm afraid that's all I have really.
That's not too bad. So then what university, Peter? You left college, and where did you go?
I went to Oxford University. I actually took a gap year, and I was I went to and worked for a newspaper in South Africa for 5 months, and then sort of travelled for another month after that in just between school and university. And that year, actually, after university, I applied to Oxford, and because my A levels had gone a bit better than I thought they were going to, and then off I went there for 3 years. So I was really involved with a lot of student journalism there as well, and it was always a real passion. And edited the student newspaper there as well, and got involved in various societies and stuff. So it was really, really good fun. It was very intense kind of university experience. A lot of people, will sort of see university sometimes as maybe not the most under the most pressure, but Oxford was really, really intense, and I enjoyed it, but it was tough. It was really tough as well. I thought about dropping out at one stage actually in first year, and I remember my mum writing me a lovely letter. I mean, my parents are brilliant for many reasons, but one of them is they've just never put any pressure on me, and they've never pushed me. They've sort of quietly, expected me to do my best and stuff, as parents do, but they've never been pushy parents. I remember my mum writing me a letter saying, I know this is really tough, and if you want to drop out, we'll support you, and you could be a bin man or have an Oxford degree, and we'll support you, and we'll be proud of you. More than education. So I'm glad I didn't drop out, but at the same time, it was good to know that if I had, it wouldn't have been the biggest deal, really, and managed to get through, got the 2-1 and everything, and that was that. But no, made some brilliant, everybody makes really good friends at university, but a number of my friends, who I'm still friends with now, actually went into journalism as well. So I went off to Newsnight, was my first posting, but a few people, Times, Telegraph, Sunday Times, Sky News, a few other places as well. So there's a good bunch, and people who are really, really, really into journalism there.
Yeah. So, again, from reading the book, there's so many highlights, so many stories you could share. But is there a few highlights? Is there a few standout moments in your journalism career that you could share with us?
With journalism, I suppose I didn't actually put this in the book, but probably my favorite moment was Obama was giving his sort of final rally, and what a lot of these. Obviously, they have what they call the stump speech, and all the candidates will go and give their stump speech. And he was just giving a stump speech. It wasn't a speech he hadn't given before, or I hadn't heard before. But there's a place called Manassas, which is in Virginia, which is just about an hour and a half drive away from Washington. And that year, that sort of autumn of 2008, I was working for BBC Washington, and I sort of gone over on a punt, really. A friend had sort of had promised me a few shifts and things. I was totally freelance the whole time, but what had happened was there's so many people at BBC Washington when there's an election on who have to go all over America and cover all sorts of things. So there's lots of kind of backfill opportunities. So I was only really out of journalism college, and it was just really good to work on it. But I remember this rally was in this place Manassas in Virginia. It was his last speech before the election day in 2008 when he was obviously became president. And it was pretty clear he was going to become president at that stage, although no one really believed it until it happened. And they have these things called kind of risers, just like a big platform where all the cameramen go with their cameras, and they can get a good shot. And it was in a really, really still, cold night in November, and it was in a sort of football stadium, American football stadium, and there were just these big lights that said "Vote for Change," and it was just totally full. And we were sort of sitting on this riser watching, about 200 yards from Obama giving this final speech, and I'm sitting beside Jeremy Paxman when he was going to give a speech. And I just thought, I can't believe people are paying me to do this. Like, this is just crazy. Wow. And I just remembered I just remember this total silence. It was just total silence when it came through. It was midnight Washington time when it became absolutely clear that Obama was definitely going to win the following day. And I just remember just how silent it was, and how there were some people who were very emotional, actually, who'd come, maybe Americans as well, who'd come through a long period of time. But I had a brilliant time as a journalist. Did all sorts of really interesting things, and interviewed all sorts of interesting people. I only ever did one red carpet. I was never particularly good at sort of showbiz celebrity stuff or whatever. But I did one thing with red carpet, and I actually managed to interview Kate Blanchett, which was quite funny.
Yes.
And that was quite a funny moment. But no, I worked with Dimbleby, worked with Piers Morgan, worked with Jeremy Paxman and stuff, and it was a really, really interesting 10 years. And then I got the opportunity to go into politics, which was great. But I would say actually the contrast in a journalist's life are probably the highlight as well. I remember doing a an interview with someone who I just remember it was the dirtiest house I've ever been in. I was doing a radio interview, and usually I would record for 10 or 15 minutes to do a sort of 3-minute report. And I remember I looked at the recording and it recorded for 6 minutes, and I just thought, right, I'm just getting out of here. I mean, it was just a really dirty house, and the subject matter was very, very difficult. So a child who died in care.
Oh.
And then I went directly from there to this absolutely huge house on the north coast, just outside Helens Bay, for a reception with a guy who was over from America. There was a bishop there. There were all sorts of quotable notables. Lord Mayor of Belfast was there and stuff, and it was all sort of canapes and quaffing wine and champagne and all the rest of it. And I just sort of thought, like, I've literally gone from one extreme to the other, and the trick is to try to treat people exactly the same, no matter which situation you're in, really. But no, I was very, very lucky in journalism. You have so many. It's the only job really that you have, or one of the very few jobs where you have the excuse to go up to anybody and ask them anything. They don't have to answer the question, but I got to know quite a lot of politicians through that. Got to know quite a lot of special advisors as well. The job I did, and that was actually the way I got into politics, was knowing someone who's a special advisor to Theresa May when she was at the Home Office, and then when this woman in particular, Fiona Hill is her name, she went to Downing Street, and then I sort of sent off my CV and thought I would hear nothing more about it. And about a week later, I was going off to the Northern Ireland office with James Brokenshire. So it was a very, very strange thing, and I think it was just a lesson in that, if you're not in, you can't win. What's the worst people can do? You just, they say no or ignore your email. But if you don't send the email, they're not going to say no or ignore it. So that was sort of how that happened.
Very good. Before we go on to the politics, I'd love to, not just for the sake of like clickbait or whatever, but because I get sucked in by Piers Morgan's rantings and ravings, and you're someone that was in and around that environment. What was he like to work with, or were you up close with?
Yeah, I mean, he's very. I've actually known him for quite a while, because he came to Oxford. Actually, he was sacked from the Mirror. You'll remember the photographs, obviously. And he came to Oxford and actually interviewed him for the student paper. So I knew him a bit through that, and he actually got me a bit of work experience at the Mirror as well, which is really nice of him.
Wow.
But, I sort of known him, and I've one friend in particular who's a very, very, very good friend of his, who's a mutual friend of mine. But I wouldn't say we're friends or anything, but we certainly know each other. I mean, just very straightforward. I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly when he goes off on a rant that people will react to it. He doesn't mind being unpopular, obviously. And I think there's a real freedom that kind of comes with not caring what people think of you. I mean, some people will say it's a bad thing, but the most successful people in television are not the kind of insecure ones who read every tweet and, worry about what everybody thinks about them. They're the people who genuinely don't care. And I would say Paxman and Piers Morgan were sort of two of those people who just don't care. I mean, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is another matter. Yeah. But Piers Morgan, he knows how to make compelling television. He knows how to have an opinion on almost everything. And I think he's a very sort of charismatic figure who we're talking about now. Whereas there are many other broadcasters I've worked with who just sort of glaze over you, sort of thing. And it's interesting as well when you kind of come out of broadcasting and you realise how little impact most broadcasting makes. A lot of people watch the news and it'll be in their mind for a very short period of time, or they'll watch a program or whatever, and it doesn't really stay with them. Whereas what I think Piers does is a lot of the things he says and does stay with people, whether they agree with them or not. And actually, if you can, part of my job, I was a reporter in Good Morning Britain for 2 years, and part of my job was to kind of explain what's going on in Syria to people who don't know where Syria is, or know that its capital is Damascus. And part of my job was to sort of have 45 seconds or a minute to explain that. But actually, maybe that's more worthwhile than the 6 minute, 7 minute reported news night to people who kind of know it all already. So it's a big kind of ethical question, I suppose, about journalism as well.
Very good, brilliant. And so, what was that transition? How did that come about, that sort of shift from journalism to politics?
I'd always had a really, really cynical view of politicians. There were some politicians I did a bit of work experience with. Danny Kennedy when I was 18, really good local representative, really good guy, a really nice guy, who I'm still friends with to this day, actually. And I saw up close the really difficult job that every local politician does, every politician in general, all the sacrifices they make, all the time away from their family and so on. And I think when I started working for Newsnight in Westminster properly covering politics around about 10 years ago, I properly got a sense of what it meant to be working in politics, and I really saw these special advisors and saw what they were up to, and these kind of ministerial aides who are everything from kind of a bag carrier to an advisor to they do all sorts of things for ministers, and they're also party political, so they're a member of the Conservative Party or Labour or whatever. So I saw them in action, and I got to know a few of them, and I got to respect a number of them as well. And some were better than others, like everybody, like any profession. Some people are good, some people aren't. But I suppose really when Theresa May became Prime Minister, I always kind of admired her and thought she was quite a good sort of moral person, I suppose. Not that I'm saying a particularly moral person, but she is. I think, and also I knew Fiona Hill, so I think a lot of getting into those kind of roles is often being trusted. Really, it's not necessarily who you know. It's just about being trusted and being kind of vouched for. Because a lot of people could do those jobs, but also it's a matter of whether you want to. Certainly, working at the Northern Ireland office for a year and a half. I mean, I went in 2017. I went between Belfast, London, Dublin, and Brussels. I took E05 flights during that 1 year period. So I mean, it's a lifestyle choice. You know, it would be very difficult to do if you had young children. It'd be very difficult to do if you had caring responsibilities, and that's kind of a like weakness of the system. But I really enjoyed it. I loved it. It was a fascinating job to do, and to get the opportunity was, probably once in a lifetime. And then James Brokenshire had resigned because he had lung cancer, and as many people will know, he was diagnosed again with another tumour. He's since had his whole lung removed, his whole right lung, so he has one lung now. But he's recovering well and doing 10,000 steps a day on his treadmill. Amazing. And we keep in really good touch. And I mean, there's certain. I work for 4 politicians. Some of them, I got on with all of them, and with many people you work with, obviously, you can have a good relationship with them. But at the end of the day, you're an employee. Whereas with James, we're proper mates, and I'd say he's kind of one of my top 10 people in the whole world, actually. And he was there for me. As I sort of say in the book a little bit, but we'll be open about it. I've had sort of mental health problems over the years, and he stuck by me through all that. Okay. Maybe time off or whatever. Whereas I've been pretty loyal to him as well. So it is quite funny. Neil, you like this actually. A friend of mine, had read the book beforehand. A friend in the acknowledgements had read the book beforehand, and I said, "Oh, I'm a bit worried about this, but I think maybe James won't like it, this particular section." And my friend just went, "Peter, James comes out of the book better than God comes out of the Bible." which is a pretty good
brilliant, very good. Yeah, I actually really did. I loved that, like how you spoke about James and. That even that dynamic with his wife and all, I just thought that was really.
He's great. He's great.
Because I think that's what can. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I'm actually moving to a new flat. I've got a new flat in London. Just bought it, and I'm giving them a virtual tour tomorrow. We're doing a video call, and I'm sure.
Oh, very good.
Kathy, his wife, is very keen to ask my opinion on things. I'll know nothing about like furnishings and colours and things.
Oh, very good. I feel like I should make a joke relevant to the book. Like, how many ovens have you got?
Yeah. Don't worry, that one's been made. That one's been made. Yeah.
I'm sure it has. But the book. But I make the point about that because I think we can so easily dehumanize politicians, and so I think how you spoke of some of your former employees or employers, particularly James Brokenshire and his wife, it really felt like it was humanizing them, which I really appreciated.
Well, that's something that I really like to do a bit more of, actually, and I sort of thought of as well. I'd really like to do something. I don't know if it's a documentary. Oh, hold on, sorry. Sorry about that. Just the lights went out. I'd really like to do something like maybe a documentary or a radio thing, or I don't think there's necessarily a book in it, but something about the impact that politics has on families. And I think there's probably a lot of crossover to really any public facing role, maybe even your own, Neil, where people kind of, you're sort of slightly public property. You can't go and buy a pint of milk without somebody asking you something, asking you to do something. With politicians as well, it's just the time, the time that you're away, the things you'll miss, the things you'll say you'll go and do, and then suddenly you've got to go to Belfast or into Westminster or whatever to do. So I think it's just a very, very tough existence, and I think a lot of kids of politicians get bullied as well. Or one thing that I know, some people I've worked for, the kids often get, there's a big controversial topic, say it's Brexit or something like that. And even teachers and things will say to the kids in school, like, what does your dad or mum think about this? And I was like, that's not very fair, So I think and people aren't necessarily being unkind or anything, they're not really trying to be, but I just think there's quite a lot in that. And I'd be interested in kind of exploring that a bit more. But no, they're great people. And actually, another boss of mine, Robert Buckland, who I mentioned earlier, the Justice Secretary, actually lived in his house for 2 weeks and drove his wife's car during the election. And Sean Buckland wouldn't mind me saying she's a terrifying person, and I knew if I pranged that car, my life wouldn't be worth living. And James actually said, I told James Brokenshire knows the Bucklands quite well, and I said, I'm really worried about his car, and James just said, like, Peter, don't worry about it. Like, if you prang that car, you'll just be dead. She's just having to go. That's it. There's no way out of it. So don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Happy campaigning.
So there's obviously, again, lots of interesting stories about all the different places, all the different departments that you worked in. Maybe just because we're a bit closer to home, is there any stories that you could tell us? Any highlights, any moments to remember from your time in the Northern Ireland office when you were working with James as Secretary of State?
Yeah, I mean, lots. I mean, it's kind of weird. It was sort of slightly weird job, because you're often in negotiations with people. I'd grown up watching on TV. I mean, Gerry Adams, Martin McGuinness, I got to know sort of relatively well. It's quite weird, because I came into a room once, and Martin McGuinness sort of said, "Oh, Peter, how are you? How's everybody in Rich Hill?" And I said, "Oh, Martin McGuinness knows where I live." And they went, "Martin McGuinness knows where I live." So it was kind of weird, but it's a very, very strange kind of process. And also, it's less about kind of what's said in the room than sometimes out of it as well. But no, it was the Northern Ireland office is just absolutely fascinating, and really, really incredible privilege. Actually, one thing I really loved doing, it was really good fun, was going to the McKenna Cup final in Newry, the Gaelic final. That James was the first Secretary of State to ever go to a Gaelic football match in Northern Ireland, and we got criticised for it because he arrived late and didn't stand for the Irish national anthem and all that kind of stuff. But that didn't really matter. I mean, what I really took from that was just the kindness and hospitality of people who were just really, really lovely. And they'd done like they engraved a little notepad and everything for him. They'd given him like so many nice things. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird as well. Like, I got to stay in Hilford Castle and things like that. There's in the sort of apartments there and things. And it was kind of weird with that. Met Prince Harry, things like that. I just got to know kind of Michelle O'Neill a bit, Arlene Foster a bit, people like that, and all the sort of various crises that were there. Got to fly on an RAF flight, which is quite weird, where they're sort of bringing you gin and tonics and things and canapes and stuff, all very people in their uniforms, and that was kind of weird as well. Once, I mean, you almost always took kind of Aer Lingus or British Airways flights, and actually got to know one of the Aer Lingus flight attendants, stewardesses, I'm not quite sure what the correct term is, but to the extent that now if I'm getting on an Aer Lingus flight, I can send her a message on Facebook and she kind of makes sure I'm in the exit row and stuff, which is really, really nice. Occasionally gives me a free cup of tea and stuff, but she's a lovely, lovely person as well. But no, there's just also the Northern Ireland office is, it's full of people who've been around for a long time, who remember way back to even sometimes people like Peter Brook and Patrick Mayhew and some of the sort of Northern Ireland secretaries from a long time ago. And I remember being told about Sean Woodward, the Northern Ireland secretary. They used to have a little private plane when security was the security situation wasn't as good. They had a private plane that they flew between Belfast and London, but obviously it all had to be signed off, and all had to be properly within the rules and everything. But Sean Woodward is a millionaire, multi-millionaire. He's married into was married, now divorced, into the Sainsbury's family. And he was told, I'm terribly sorry, Secretary of State, this flight to Belfast isn't justified within the rules. And he said, how much does it cost? And they said, £12,000, whatever. He just took out the checkbook, wrote the check, handed them a check, So you hear kind of funny stories like that as well.
I don't know if it's how to articulate this, but did you find a huge difference being in England so long and coming back into Northern Ireland politics? Is it like, was it frustrating, or was it like?
Oh yeah, definitely frustrating, and I think that it's sometimes hard to explain. James was very good and picked things up really, really quickly, and I think I only ever really explained like one thing to him. Well, a couple of things to him. One was actually going to like Gaelic match. I said, like, if you stand for the national anthem, you'll be criticised. If you're arrive late for the national anthem, you'll be criticised. So you may as well just choose one and let's do it, basically. There's no way out of this. And the other thing was I explained to him what a garden centre unionist was, which is someone who's so middle class, they're more likely to be going to doing something middle class, like going to a garden centre, than voting for the Ulster Unionist Party, or more moderate unionists. So. The kind of people that would have voted for David Trimble, who now don't vote for Ulster Unionists anymore. So I think I explained a couple of things like that, but he picked things up really quickly. But no, the sort of pettiness of arguments and stuff about flags and things like that, like he just took it in his stride and was very, very good. And so, but it was just being in, you go as well from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, you're maybe in a meeting at number 10 about something really important, and then you fly to Belfast and somebody sort of just decides that there's some controversy about a politician buying shoes, or somebody won't go with someone boycotting something because some other politician's there or something. You just sort of think it does, a lot of it does seem very, very petty, but sometimes people have their reasons, and sometimes people feel they have to stand up for things that maybe their electorate are putting pressure on them. Maybe they're getting hundreds of phone calls about something and you don't understand the pressure they're in, and then they speak out about something and you think, oh, catch yourself on. So sometimes the context is important as well. But no, definitely I've always tried to stay in touch with Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland politics and people within it, and I think there are a number of people who come to England who lose their accent, which is something I've really tried not to do. Lived in America and lived in England, but really tried not to lose my accent, and that's very important to me, because there's some people who do, and I find that very frustrating. But no, it is strange. Stormont is a strange place, and there's some strange people there. But it's the same in every party. Like, every party is a coalition of all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, and different people are in it for different reasons. And one thing James really taught me actually was the importance of volunteers, and the importance of there's a small bunch of people who are professional politicians and make their living out of politics, but the majority of people who are involved in politics are going out on a wet Saturday afternoon to post leaflets through a door, and they're the ones who you need to really appreciate and not be snobby about, as some people are. So that was yet another lesson the great man taught me.
Very good. Yeah, I think just with the accent thing, I think listening to Graham McDowell talk to Graham, the golfer. His accent sometimes I'd be like, I would do anything in my power to make sure that I never lost my accent. It is
kind of weird. The ones that I've a few people who I went to university with, not name any names, but they're somewhere in the middle of the Irish Sea, and they sort of talk like that. And just like, please stop talking, please.
I don't know if Nicky Williamson will listen to this, but Nicky.
Yeah.
So Nicky went to New York for just under 3 months, and he came back home, and for at least 3 or 4 months after that, he had this bizarre twang, and we took the mick out of him, and as you will be able to tell now, 18 or so years later, we're still taking the mick out of him.
Very good. But no, it's all down to how you pronounce power. And it is funny, because sometimes you find yourself, you say words to people and some say, what are you saying? And then you find yourself saying, no, it's power. And it's like, no, it's not, it's power. So power sharp for an hour.
Power Well, very good. One of the parts, Peter, that I'm sort of making this, I'm sort of quoting from your book here, and if you have anything you could speak in this, because whether it was from your perspective as a journalist or in the world of politics. I was challenged by it even just in the world of church, because you talked about this idea of understanding everyone's perspectives. And I think it was, I don't know if I'm quoting this exactly, but I think you said something along the lines of, it's weird when people feel they cannot debate, discuss and drink with those that we disagree with. And I just found myself stopping in the middle of the book and like, what would it be like? Especially in Northern Ireland, especially in some of those places that we find ourselves in, like, why can we not do that better? Like, why can we not? It is weird that we cannot debate, discuss, and have a drink with people that we disagree with.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned that, because I was actually inspired by, I'm not religious at all, I'm completely agnostic, I'm afraid. But I was actually inspired by, there was I think it was a Presbyterian or Methodist moderator a couple of years ago, I can't remember exactly, but it was definitely a moderator who went to the Sinn Féin conference, the Ardash, as they call it, and said, I think it's something along those lines actually, and he said, buy a cup of tea for someone you disagree with. And I remember I actually bumped into Martina Anderson in an airport lounge, and a Sinn Féin politician who I probably couldn't disagree with more. I don't think there's a living person I could disagree with more in terms of Northern Ireland. And she's a very, very friendly person. And we were about to get the flight, and I said, she was with a few of her maybe workers or whatever. And I said, I remember watching your Ardash on the telly, and this minister saying, buy a cup of tea for somebody you disagree with. So, sometime can I buy you a cup of tea and we'll have a chat? And I said, yeah, no problem. We haven't done it yet, but it was quite funny actually. The guys who were with her said, oh, I remember that guy who said that. Yeah. So, no, I think as well, I mean, a lot of people want to be really, really strong in their opinions. And I went into a lot of politics not really knowing what I thought. And I still don't know what I think about a number of things. I'm much stronger now than I used to be. But I think because of journalism, for 10 years, it was my job not to have an opinion. And then for 3.5 years, it was my job to have an opinion on everything and tell civil servants, this is what I think, this is what the Secretary of State thinks, and all the rest of it. I think there are a lot of people who very happily get into people they respect, or a newspaper they respect, or news sources they respect, for whatever reason, and then kind of parrot those opinions. And I always say that, if you read The Guardian every day, read the Daily Telegraph for a week, if you watch BBC News for every night, watch Channel 4 News every night for a week and see how it goes, or listen to a bit of talk radio or LBC or whatever, and just work out not just what you think, but why you think it. And being challenged in your views. There's nothing wrong with being challenged in your views, and it actually can make, I mean, I'm sure you know a lot about this, Neil. There's, Northern Ireland's a much less religious society than it was when we were growing up. And although I would argue it's probably more Christian society now, in that there's so many people who are brilliant Christian witnesses, and that's one of the reasons I'm agnostic. I've always admired people like my mother. Actually, a lot of her friends from the Chill here incredibly have this incredible Christian witness. But why do you believe what you believe? Well, a lot of people during your life and people you grew up with will probably have said to you, oh, that's a load of nonsense, or why would you believe that? Or, you're just saying that because of your family, or, whatever. Yeah. And actually you've got to work it out why you believe what you believe, whether that's a political belief or religious belief or whatever. And I think knowing what you don't know, and knowing how much more, you can learn loads of things, you can read loads of books, but there's always more to learn and more to do. And I'm not kind of ruling out the fact that you can change your opinion, and there's nothing wrong with changing your opinion. There's nothing wrong with being convinced. There's nothing wrong in terms of hearing the counterfactual or hearing what other people would say, because then you're either convinced or you realize more strongly why you believe what you believe. And I just feel very, very strongly about that. And I think we need to let in lots more opinions than the ones that we just not, and have, as you say, a much more civil conversation about all sorts of issues, and understand. Politics was really good for me. University actually was really good for me as well, to get to know a lot of people who believe a lot of things I just really don't believe. But I know why I don't believe them, rather than just saying, oh yeah,
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Peter. I suppose that's why we wanted to do this, to do something like this, is because I just want to know the names and the faces and the issues, like what's going on within people that make up our community. And rather than just selecting people to have a conversation and just like entrenching yourself further in your own position, or just sticking with your own.
Well, I can also say that growing up in Rich Hill, I don't think I liked it very much. I think I felt it was small, and I wanted to go to London, and I wanted to kind of, I don't know, broaden my horizons or whatever I thought at that time. And it's really interesting. There's a guy, Paul Johnson, who you might know, goes to Rich Hill Methodist, and I have had this conversation a few times. Paul is a really, really successful lawyer and has gone around the world doing all sorts of things. He's a really smart guy, really nice guy. And he could easily be living in, London or Kent or wherever in some massive house. And the two of us, I kind of had the conversation how we both are still drawn to Rich Hill. There's something, Paul's built there, made his house there, his mum lives across the road. We can never get away from it. And I think I appreciate it so much more now than when I grew up there, because you don't know what you don't know, and the kind of community bonds. And there was a very, very difficult situation that a friend of mine was in about a year and a half ago, and she rang me in the middle of the night to go to her house and help her with it. And I went halfway across London and did that, no problem. It was an hour in taxi and so on. And I was just, as I was going there to deal with that horrible situation, I just thought, if this was Rich Hill, there are 100 people my parents could ring to help them, who would be on their doorstep at 2 o'clock in the morning helping them with stuff. There's so many good things about knowing, Norman and Jennifer and Neville and Super Value, knowing everybody in Cafe Casa and Susan, and it's just there's something brilliant about that, and knowing your neighbours and chatting to people, and even just kind of characters around the village, like like Jackie McCoo and Lord Rich Hill himself and all the rest of it. Absolutely. You just know to do anything for you. And I think there's an amazing sense of community. And I've only really, because London is so anonymous, you don't really know your neighbours very well. And, it's a huge place. I think the value of that community and community spirit, and actually the church comes into that to a huge degree, in terms of people looking out for one another, checking in on people. And it's so important at this time as well. I mean, my mum is a big talker. I'm a big talker. My mum's a big talker as well. And she is, a chain of people, a kind of prayer chain of people she'll ring and chat, kind of check in with every week or two during the COVID time. And I just sort of think, like, how many communities have that? How many, there are loads of people I know. My next door neighbour in London, very old guy, has just gone into a care home, actually. I'm not really sure anybody was ringing him to see if he was okay. I mean, I was trying to pop in every now and again, but it was just, there's a real value to a close community, and I think I didn't realise that growing up, and I realise it now, and I always return to Rich Hill, and it's always home.
I appreciate it. Just I'd seen it somewhere on Facebook recently that you were just, there must be that feeling of coming home. You were really encouraging people to get out and support Cafe Casa.
I was a bit worried actually, because it wasn't Susan actually, but someone else was saying, they're just like many businesses suffering with COVID and so on. But I just thought it was really important to kind of go there, and I tried to nip in a few times and get a few things. I mean, obviously, if I happened to buy a big bun, a big biscotti kind of things, or a 15 or whatever, just helping my community,
I like that. I couldn't go past without saying, like, I don't know your dad all that well, but I was actually on a walk. I was on a walk with Nick McKnight this morning, and he was speaking incredibly glowingly of your father. But I do know your mum a wee bit better, and I have to say, like, in terms of Christian witness around Rich Hill, your mum is certainly up at the top of the list in terms of a Christian witness.
It's funny actually. I mean, there's sort of a group of it's quite interesting actually. There was, during the Drumcree crisis many years ago, my mum set up and a few of her friends. We had a load of people over to our house for prayer meetings during the Drumcree crisis. Actually from some people from the Catholic Church as well came, and there were about at times I think there were 20 or 25 people every morning, for a few weeks in our front room, and then it kind of dwindled, and the kind of end of that is, or what it is now, are my mum and 3 of her friends who since that time have met almost every Saturday morning and had a prayer meeting. Although I've been known to call it the gossip meeting. But the Saturday girls, as you call them, are just like 4 really firm friends who have been really there for each other through many things over the years. And that's part of it as well, and I think we're just very lucky. To Nick as well, I talk about just a great guy who I've batted around a number of ideas with over the years, and actually Paul Ritchie as well. I don't know if you ever knew Paul.
Oh yes, yeah.
Visual Methodist, real intellectual, like a really, really,
Mm-hmm.
really smart guy who used to go for walks with as well, and talk about like Lutheranism and all this kind of stuff.
Really?
So, like you do have those kind of people as well. So yeah.
Very good. While we're still talking about the conversation in Rich Hill, we can't not speak about the Facebook page that you set up, which I did not realise until I read the book. So we had Alan Turtle on the first episode a number of weeks back, just giving us some people, even on this call, that did not know that Hillsborough had stolen the gates from us.
We have a Lisburn man here. He doesn't even know the criminality his brethren have been involved with.
So can you give us?
I'm not guilty.
Wiping your hands off.
Tell it to the judge.
Can you bring people up to speed on that maybe don't know about it, and direct them to your Facebook page?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give us some hope that
please join my Facebook page. Give Rich Hill Castle back its gates. It's funny actually because people are a little bit divided over this. It's sort of been a thing that's been around for a long time, and I remember even in school, people have told me, they would write letters off to the Prime Minister or the Queen or whatever, saying, give us back our gates. And ironically, actually, the gates obviously were taken in 1936 and are still at Hillsborough Castle. And ironically, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland used to have, the bailiwick was that they had the power to give the gates back. And then things changed just before I went to the Northern Ireland office. So it was actually Theresa Villiers was the last person who had the power to give the gates back, and then it changed. And there's this outfit called Historic Royal Palaces, who are kind of like an arm's length body. They run places like Kensington Palace and so on. And now they have the power. So sadly, the Secretary of State didn't have the power anymore. But actually, believe it or not, I mean, you can say whatever you like about Karen Bradley, and a lot of people have a lot of opinions on Karen, who I worked with just for a few weeks while she was kind of settling in as Secretary of State after James. But she is very much of the opinion that the gates should be given back to Rich Hill. Yes. But some people sort of contacted me and sort of said, well, actually, maybe we're not ready yet, and maybe the castle needs to be in maybe better shape, or maybe need to wait a few years and see what happens with the castle or whatever. So. But I cannot help but feel aggrieved every time I'm in Hillsborough when there's actually a little plaque at the front of the gates, which gives the story about the Ancient Monuments Act, and they were taken to Hillsborough for safekeeping as well, which is highly suspect. Well, the person who actually knows loads about this, I actually did a little piece for a program on UTV about this and interviewed Alan Turtle about it. Another person who knows about it is Mrs. Henderson. Audrey Henderson knows a lot of stuff about it, and she was on the telly as well. I went to Hillsborough and interviewed a few people about it and so on. And I think one day it will happen. The centenary as well is coming up in 2036. So I hope by then we'd be ready to receive the gates back and keep them in. I mean, they are beautiful, but we shall see. But no, join the Facebook group, get behind the campaign.
Come on, 15 years to get it done.
That's it. We can do it.
So Peter, just as we're beginning to wrap up here, another few minutes. Really enjoying this. Thanks for your time. And COVID. So if you just for a few moments, if you could just tell us maybe the highs and lows that you've found over the last sort of year or two, any learning that you've experienced.
I think there's a lot to learn from COVID. Actually, I mean, I've spent actually more than half the last year in Rich Hill. Mainly with my parents. Actually, I wrote the book in Rich Hill as well after being sacked. But it's interesting because I think one of the real highs was actually realizing that, I mean, at the very start, my parents didn't want me to go out and didn't want me to go down to the shop and didn't want me to buy groceries and stuff. And we had so many people who were just really kind. People like Catherine McCready, for example, who a lot of people will know, and more like Walker and people like that, who brought stuff around, took orders and things, and grocery orders and bought those. And we're just so kind and so community spirited. And we're just doing it for us, we're doing it for a load of people. And I think that yet again, community kind of coming together was just lovely. Yeah. I also spent a lot of time with my parents, which was really nice. I hadn't really done that in a few years, and went for a lot of walks with my dad, which was good. And had a lot of arguments with my mother, but mostly she won and involved me apologising. But no, it's a funny thing when, I mean, I'm 36 now, and it's sort of a funny thing to kind of be at home and,
Yeah.
just sort of have your, sometimes, having your meals being made, and, breakfast in bed sometimes and things like that, which is lovely. The low point, I think, was probably just, I think a lot of people felt very isolated, very sad. And I was lucky in that I actually, lockdown has been okay for me. I certainly miss friends, miss seeing people, and it's obviously very important to keep in touch with people. But and actually, it's interesting because there was one guy in London, actually a neighbour of mine, who my housemate was out walking one day, and he just said, "I live across the road. I haven't really seen very many people in a few months. Can I walk with you?" And she walked with him for a while, and I've actually started going walking with him once a week. And like, he's a perfectly nice guy, and he's a really intelligent guy. And it turns out actually he worked in Downing Street years ago as a civil servant, and I didn't know that when I started working with him. And he just got all these amazing stories from back in the day, and I've kind of built up a bit of a friendship with him. And I think what we need to kind of remember when lockdown is over is all the good stuff, but also the lessons we've learned about, should we be rushing around so much? Do we need to fill the day with things all the time? There's been a lot of sort of sitting and thinking and just a bit of time to do things. And I know, one of the really good things is that, I cleared out basically every possession I had in Rich Hill. I went through it all and decided what I wanted and what I didn't want, and, watched a lot of Homes Under the Hammer. But it's been, I think there's a lot of good lessons, and I think a lot of people are probably reevaluated, especially working from home and doing things like this and Zooms and things. It's actually been very, very positive for a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to ask, do I need to go into work 5 days a week in Belfast or London, or do I need to sit in traffic? Are there other things I can do? I think a lot of people have just a lot of time to think about their life and kind of reevaluate it. And a lot of people who haven't at any time at all because they're homeschooling, or they've got caring responsibilities, or they want schools to come back, or they want to relieve that pressure. So we can't forget how tough it's been for a lot of people. But lights at the end of the tunnel. My mum and dad both got their vaccines in the last 10 days, which is fantastic. And I think we're going to come out of this, and we're going to come out stronger.
Great. But thanks for that, Peter. It's really helpful. I've got a couple of things. Paul, do you want to?
I was just thinking about COVID's hit, obviously, politics and journalism. Probably that's your two prongs, really, isn't it? And especially kind of around the trust stuff, and people are, looking for information themselves and stuff, and that's had sort of mixed results, I guess. But do you think there's probably this has caused a bit of a rethink on how journalism, even politics, is, I guess, especially kind of how it's presented to people, I guess? Do you think there's going to be a bit of a rewrite with that?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question, Paul. And I think there kind of has been already, actually. It's really interesting. We're not really used to press conferences where you see either Boris Johnson or Arlene Foster and Michelle O'Neill kind of directly talking to you and answering these questions. And we're not used to seeing that as often. And there's certainly more government in people's lives at this stage than there really ever has been in my life. At one stage, they're actually, well, they still are, I suppose, but essentially saying, you can't leave your house and here's why, or you're only allowed to socialize with a certain number of people. And I think that's been a really rude awakening for a lot of people. I think that a lot of people in politics who aren't particularly comfortable with that either, because they don't believe government should be telling people what to do to such an extent. And certainly Boris Johnson himself is someone who is, and me as a conservative, I want to give people as much freedom as possible. I don't want to dictate to people how they live their lives. And it's been really interesting from that perspective. Also, with journalism, the whole point of journalism, the only thing the BBC has over me going online and just talking is trust, and is the trust in institutions. And do we trust our government? Do we trust the BBC? Do we trust other, a newspaper or whatever? And I think a lot of that has been chipped away for quite a long time, and a lot of the institutions of the state and so on are less trusted. But it's really interesting. I think the question, I suppose, from a political perspective is, what will people remember? Because one thing that really struck me in politics is how little people remember as time goes on. I think the three things people will remember from this period are Dominic Cummings and Barnard Castle, 100,000 people died of COVID, and the vaccines. And I think that's kind of it, actually, when people look back on this politically, big political events in the last wee while. So whilst during Brexit, for example, which I was there for really 3.5 years of, things would happen. We'd lose a vote, or Theresa May would kind of be under pressure or whatever. And people don't remember all that stuff. And, you're sitting in your little bunker in Westminster thinking, oh, we just lost a vote on, the third amendment to the withdrawal agreement. That's a really bad thing. And then you think, well, actually, most people don't follow this with any degree that you do. And I find myself now, as someone who consumes less news, a lot less news than I did when I was in government, because I had Sky News on in the office every day. I do listen to the news. I get breaking news alerts. I watch the 10 o'clock news and things like that. But I don't follow it with the same detail. And but I still follow in a lot more detail than a lot of people do. And I think a lot of politics and journalism is about the impression left rather than necessarily the facts. And I think that's going to be really interesting when we come to the election in 2024. And actually here in England, we have local elections and mayoral elections in May, and how parties do as a result of that is going to be really interesting as well.
Yeah, I think there's we get Robin Swan pop up every week, and I think there seems to be people are starting to appreciate. Well, people I've been speaking to are starting to appreciate probably the difficult position he's in, and they're saying, well, he's probably been the one who's had to say the difficult things, and trying to explain to the population that this is a crisis we're in, and it's not going to be easy, and so on. And I think you're right. Probably history will probably be the judge of this. Looking back and going,
Well, he's a really interesting character, actually. A very good example of. I don't know him particularly well. I know him a bit. But I think he's an example of someone with a lot of integrity who has, he was leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. He gave that up because he wanted a slightly quieter life, and was given the sort of health ministry as a bit of a consolation prize. And then suddenly little did he know, thrust into the limelight. And he and his family got death threats. Being a newspaper in Northern Ireland, which I thought was very irresponsible, gave out basically his postcode and said certain people had died or been vaccinated in his postcode, which I thought was really not okay. And he doesn't have to do it, and a lot of people don't kind of have to do the jobs they're doing. They choose to. Of course, they are elected leaders, and we absolutely have every right to ask them lots of difficult questions. But what I found was that, governing is really difficult. It is really difficult, and you've got to make very, very difficult decisions all the time. And Rishi Sunak, who's someone I work with quite a lot, he was a junior minister when I was in the Ministry of Housing. I know him pretty well. He's going to make really, really difficult decisions about where money's going in the budget in a few weeks' time. Should we be lifting universal credit by £20? Should we be giving money to homeless migrants? Should we be giving money to should we extend the furlough scheme, for example, on how do we pay all that money back? Like, those are really, really difficult decisions, and no matter what you do, people will criticise you. And I think because there's more government in people's lives, people are more involved and think about those decisions in a more day-to-day way, and they realise just how tricky it is. And I think we need to stop demonising our politicians so much. I mean, look, some of them are dreadful people, there's no doubt about it, as there are dreadful people in basically every profession, journalism, the church, whatever. But I think we need to kind of give people a bit of a break sometimes and realise that politics in particular, it is a lifestyle choice. I think people really have to want to do it. And yes, there are some people who are on the make. There are some people who want to make a load of money. There's some people who are just in it to get power and things like that. But the majority of people I met, and I mean this across all parties, I've actually struck up quite a good few friendships with people in Labour and the Lib Dems over the years. It's generally people who want to make a difference. And I think Robin Swan, and actually a lot of people in politics in Northern Ireland have that. That's their starting principle. It's all the other stuff that kind of gets in the way when you have silly arguments about flags.
That's really helpful. Really,
I actually started an argument about a flag once, which was I was quite proud of. But pride being the operative term. in that the UK government flew, the rainbow flag, the pride flag from every government building, except Stormont House in Belfast. And I said, well, why I have a load of gay friends and know a load of gay people. I said, well, why aren't we flying this? And James Brookenshire said, yeah, why aren't we flying this? And then we flew it. And lots of people were going, oh, this is dreadful, and this is the dawn of the apocalypse because we're flying a flag. I'm quite proud of the flag row I started.
Congratulations.
It wouldn't have taken much, I don't think.
Yes, exactly.
Just again, you were mentioning just a few more political figures you were mentioning. I read the book to the end thinking, did Peter finish this book before or after Dominic Cummings left Downing Street?
I
wanted to know what your reaction was to.
Well, it's really interesting actually because I'm really, I mean, I was quite kind about Dominic in the book, and I do think he's a very, very, very smart guy, and he's not everybody's cup of tea, obviously, but sometimes in politics you can't be everybody's best friend. But it's funny actually because the book came out on the 27th of October. There was quite a lot of publicity and interviews and so on, and then I kind of tailed off a little bit. And there was sort of a week where I sort of thought, okay, well, this is, publicity's over kind of thing. And then Lee Kane, who was the director of communications, he resigned, and then Dominic resigned the next day. And in a 7 or 8 day period, I think I did 25 broadcast interviews. Wow. And wrote 5 articles, including for like the Sunday Express and the Evening Standard and things like that, Belfast Telegraph. And it gave the book a huge lift. So all I can say is thanks for Dominic. So it's really, it's all money in my pocket. So not there's any money in writing a book. By the way, if you want to make your fortune, do not write a book. It was quite funny actually because I had a researcher in the book, really, really good, sixth former actually. And it was quite funny. One friend of mine who's very, very kind of woke in these sort of things. I hope you're paying her the living wage, and she's, you're paying her properly and not exploiting her and all this kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, she makes this amount an hour for doing the research and whatever. And then I realized per hour, she was getting paid a lot more than I was for writing the book. Like there's no way I would ever be paid as much as she was per hour for the book. But anyway, it's just a funny thing. I'm not complaining. But no, I'm very grateful for Dominic to resign at that time. I think the writing was on the wall really since Barnard Castle. I mean, you can't really recover from that particularly. And it's interesting actually for the political wonks out there who perhaps know some of these personalities. There's a guy called Steve Hilton who was David Cameron's sort of Dominic Cummings-esque person. And then for Theresa May, there's a guy called Nick Timothy who was her chief of staff, who was a very radical thinker. And these radical people never last that long. Steve Hilton, I think, lasted about 2 years, but longer than 2 years. Nick Timothy lasted 1 year in Downing Street, and Dominic didn't last 18 months. So it's interesting, one person can't change the whole system. But any time I worked with him, he was okay. I mean, he was scary, definitely, no doubt about it. And I wouldn't have crossed him. But if you're going to be, I mean, he never had the job title, but if you're going to be chief of staff or thereabouts the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, like you've got to be a top performer. You can't be a pushover.
Yeah. So I'm so aware of, like, we've scratched the surface on many of on your political career and your journalism career. I know there's other stuff that you're interested in, but just for the last few moments, mainly as much because it's an area I'm passionate about, and I do know that it was part of your bio that you have been mentoring a teenager in the care system, and I'm passionate about that. But also, this Friday is Care Day 2021. It's the sixth time that the guys at Voipik have they did this, started this 6 years ago, and so because it's Care Day coming up, I'd love to just to speak about that for a few moments, Peter, if you would.
All I want to say about that is, Neil, I've probably done less than 1% of the caring that you've done for children in care, and it's brilliant that you and Judith are doing such a fantastic thing. And to anybody else out there who's thinking about fostering or adopting, please do it, because there are something like 80,000 children in care in the UK, and what was really interesting, the thing I do and the reason I'm interested is I mentor, as you say, a kid. He's 16. I can't get his name unfortunately, but he's a really good kid. I've been hanging out with him for about 3 years. We talk on the phone usually once every week or 10 days or so. We meet up usually once a month, although it's been a bit less, obviously during COVID and lockdowns and all the rest of it, and just go and do something fun. and the idea and what's called an independent visitor, which is not a huge commitment at all. As I say, I do it once a month, and it's a phone call every few days. And he's just a really great guy who I just kind of hang out with, and I'm sort of another adult in his life who provides a bit of consistency. And a lot of people in the care system, as you know, really just don't have any consistency. They'll have all sorts of different social workers, all sorts of different foster placements, and that kind of stability that I think the two of us, actually, you and me, Neil, have been so, lucky to have. It was really interesting, actually, when I went to university. It was only then, really, that I realised how many people, had a complicated family situation for whatever reason. I'm not saying for a second there aren't brilliant single parents out there or anything like that, but and everybody's different. But I just was so lucky, and I've been incredibly privileged to have those kind of anchors. And you realise that so many people don't. And what I found most interesting about the training for the independent visitor stuff, and it was pretty extensive, and obviously you've got to go through all sorts of checks in terms of criminal records and all that kind of thing, for obvious reasons. But what I found really interesting was we got a lecture about child protection and stuff, and why children are put in care. And you hear all the time about things happening, things in the news with kids and stuff who aren't in care, and you think should be, and think, well, they should be taken off the parents. But the legal requirement is barely adequate. So if you have parents who are giving, by a legal definition, barely adequate care to children, well, their children can't be taken off them. So these 80,000 kids who are in the care system fall below that. So they've all been through horrendous things, sometimes things I can't even imagine, don't want to imagine. And if anybody can provide some sort of stability, some sort of understanding, and actually just a bit of fun as well. I mean, a lot of kids in care have very serious lives and not a lot of crack. They're sitting in meetings with adults talking about their future, and as well as all the stuff that kids do in school, and all the seriousness of that. And I think they often don't have an opportunity just to be children and just play and have fun and be carefree and take risks and learn things and all the kind of stuff that everything's sort of risk assessed within to a fine point. So I've been really privileged. Just, I mean, as I say, it's only 3 or 4 hours a month over the last 3 or 4 years, but I've loved doing it. I think that maybe I know you've adopted, Neil, and that's a massive step. And fostering is a massive step as well. And you're just your whole life is turned upside down by that. I think maybe I should do a podcast just with Neil on like how his life has been changed by all that. So huge admiration for anybody who does that. And I think there's so many people as well who work in the system, social workers and so on, and they have a really, really tough job. And I think there's a lot to be admired about a lot of what they do. Obviously they're good and bad ones, but I think if a kid can get through the care system and have a good life, that's marvellous. And actually I was doing some more training, again, safeguarding training, last night for the placement I do. You've got to top it up every year. And there was one placement, my young guy will be leaving care in a couple of years, which is a whole other thing about what happens next and life skills and all the rest of it. And the woman from the charity was telling me that one of her placements, they've kept in touch for years and years and years afterwards, even though they're not kind of formally together in this kind of independent visitor thing. And the independent visitor is now godmother to two of the children of the girl in care who was in care. So those kind of relationships can exist. And I think people sort of immediately think kids in care, they're all problem children. They've had problems, but they're not all problem children. Many of them are very, very intelligent, very interested kids who just need a bit of a chance, really.
Yeah. And sometimes it's often the teenagers that get the hardest rap. They are given the hardest time.
Well, being a teenager is hard, in general, and then you add all the other stuff. I mean, I was pretty miserable between the ages of 12 and 15 or so, and I had about the most stable background you can come across, and then you add all the other stuff in.
Yeah, and I really value like what you've said and what you're doing, Peter, because that level of consistency, it is it is huge. It is so significant, but it's not just the consistency; it's somebody cheering them on, and that's the stuff that moves us. That's the stuff that like it almost gets me emotional. The fact that there's so many kids that don't simply have someone cheering them on, or there to pick them up at the school gates, or there to just champion what they're doing next. And so that level of consistency that you're talking about for this young man, and the level of how you're cheering him on and championing him is so significant.
As I say, Neil, it's really a very, very small proportion of what you and people who care on a more consistent basis do, but I do enjoy it as well, and you get a lot out of it. And it's funny because he really doesn't read very much. He's not a big reader, as many teenage boys are not readers. I'm a huge reader, but he's not. And I bought him a book. Well, I bought him a book a few times, and it's actually kind of a running joke that anytime I buy him a present for Christmas or whatever, he doesn't want a book. But he cares for some chickens, and at the place where he stays, there's some chickens he cares for and looks after them. And he was told me all this stuff about chickens and care of chickens and how it all has to, and all the problems with lice, and he went into huge detail. And I said, "Oh, where did you learn all this?" He said, "Well, in the book you gave me." It's like, yes, he read a book. Brilliant.
Yeah, and again, it's just important to me, and I appreciate the chance just to highlight it this week. And I'm sure you know Jude Hill at UTV. Yes. Jude had done a report last night on this Friday being Care Day and how we're celebrating the life of care experienced children and young people. And her report highlighted that since the pandemic, there's been 178 extra kids have been added onto this already stretched care system, and so any opportunity that we have to highlight it, we'll take it. And so thanks for.
No worries. How many kids have you fostered?
2.
Uh-huh.
We try to do it sort of. We've had a mix. We've had long term, and then respite. There's just sometimes kids just need a break for 3 or 4 days in a week, and so we do that. So yeah, a mixture. We had a teenager with us. We had a teenager with us for 9 months, and then she transferred to independent living, and now we have a young girl that comes to us 3 or 4 days a week. So yeah,
brilliant.
We've taken up so much of your time, which we're really grateful for. I always love to end with you offering us a recommendation of what I didn't tell you this, but hopefully you have something that you're currently reading or watching or listening to that you could recommend to us.
Oh goodness. Let me see. Reading or watching or listening to?
Anyone. Don't have to any one of them.
Okay, let me think. Put me on the spot. I have really enjoyed recently, actually, Rich Hill link. If you haven't listened to it already, Gordon Adair's podcast, absolutely brilliant. It's called "Did the Right Man Hang?" I think it's called "Assume Nothing. Did the Right Man Hang?" And I know a load of people have been talking about it, but it's just this fascinating story about a woman who was found dead in the Birches years ago, like literally about 100 years ago. And all the kind of generational kind of cover up and how it's all been. And he spent ages on it. And Gordon's a really, really good guy. He's a really good journalist as well. He's had a lot of challenges with his own Parkinson's. Mm-hmm. And there's a 6-part series, and I thought it was going to be 6 parts, and then there was a 7th part because there are all these different revelations. And I just finished listening to it there at the weekend, and I just cannot recommend it highly enough. I love all that true crime stuff. Another one, West Cork, is another brilliant one. But Gordon's played a blinder, so keep it Rich Hill. And
that's great. Peter, thank you so much. Honestly, it's been a privilege to get the chance to chat to you, and thanks for giving us your time.
Well, thanks very much for having me. It's been great, and keep doing what you're doing, because not only on the care front, but with this podcast as well. So it's a good idea.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Ordinary People was hosted by Neil Dawson. It was produced, edited and engineered by Andrew Gribbin and Paul Woods. Head over to ordinarypodcast.com for show notes, links, previous episodes and all the ways you can contact the show.